Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today we're listening to Evil in the Room, the Ashling Murphy story.
Sisters or
Murder up
daughters that
close.
genuinely could have happened to anyone.
As the investigation into her death continues, it's also understood that a new person of interest has emerged in the case.
He said, I did it, I murdered, I am the murderer.
No remorse, no empathy. Thought he could get off with murder.
Ashley left work a little after 2:30 on the afternoon of the 12th of January. She got into a red Seat car, it was parked outside the school, and she headed for Tullamore. It was a nice, dry, crisp, bright, sunny day, and she decided to go for a bit of exercise along at the Grand Canal.
And she drove from Durrow towards Dangan Car Park, which is a car park along the stretch of the Grand Canal, and she was spotted on CCTV footage along that route. And it was around 10 to 3 that she arrived at that car park. She pulled up in her car, got out of the vehicle, and she was wearing a pink bobble woolen hat. She was wearing a camogie tracksuit top, pair of leggings, a pair of runners,
and her Fitbit timed the start of her walk at 14:51, and she started to walk in an eastward direction along the Grand Canal.
She was on her own. She went down as far as Digby Bridge, and we know that because she did meet people there. And then she came back on herself and was heading back towards the car park.
The data from her Fitbit shows her walking 1 kilometre, 2 kilometres, and by 20 past 3 she'd walked 3 kilometres. Then at 21 minutes past 3, the data on the Fitbit goes haywire. Everything becomes erratic and volatile, and Ashleen's heart rate begins to decrease. It was 120 when she was walking along the canal. It went down to 100, 80, 60, and by 31 minutes past 3, there was no heartbeat at all. Aisling was killed around about 3:30, and the very first call about the murder came into Tullamore Garda station just 5 minutes later.
Obviously, Gardaí were immediately on the scene. A three-car convoy was sent out. Their efforts were made to resuscitate Aisling at the scene, but sadly, she didn't make it.
At the time of her death, Ashley Murphy, she was 23 years old. She had recently graduated as a primary school teacher from Mary Immaculate College in Limerick, and she started working in Durrow National School in March 2021, around 9 months before her death. She was described by many, including I think the principal of the school, as a real inspirational teacher. She was someone who was loved by all her first class pupils.
Her whole family was really steeped in traditional music. They performed at FLAS and at music festivals right across the country. She had a deep love for traditional music. She was a very talented and very accomplished traditional musician. She played the fiddle, that was her instrument of choice. She performed, she competed, and she also passed her skills on to the younger generation. And she also loved GAA, and she was very athletic, she was very sporty. Teachers who taught her when she was young described her as fearless when she took to the sports field. She loved camogie in particular, and she played for her local club, Kilcormac Killahy. She just seemed like a really down-to-earth, genuine person. I think like so many people around the country after she died really resonated with Aisling Murphy, because we all know an Aisling Murphy. She's a sister, she's a girlfriend, she's a cousin, she's a friend, and she was all of those things to so many people. She was 23 years of age, so young, her whole life ahead of her. But you did really get the sense that she had already touched many lives, and even after she had passed away, she touched even more.
We know on the Friday after she died, there was a vigil held in Tullamore, and hundreds of people turned out that evening. And I remember seeing the pictures of her family, very poignant scenes of them walking along the stretch of the Grand Canal, kind of retracing Aislinn's last steps, all the while the crime scene tent was still up at that point.
That grief rippled out from Tullamore. It spread across the country. Indeed, it spread to many parts of the world. There were vigils for Aisling in America, in the UK, in Australia, in Canada. A hashtag was born. She was just going for a run.
After it emerged that Aisling Murphy had been killed along the banks of the Grand Canal in Tullamore, there was a huge outpouring of grief, not just in Tullamore and back in her own native part of County Offaly. Thousands of people in Ireland and right across the world were united in mourning the death of Aisling Murphy.
I think the reaction was just one of absolute shock, horror, anger. I think people just really could not believe that this could happen to a young woman. Seemingly, it was known at the time, a random attack. A young woman who had just gone out in the middle of the afternoon to go do some exercise. And in a town like Tullamore, which would have been a very tight-knit community, and I think people were just horrified at the horrendous nature of Aislinn's death.
Aisling was a young woman with her whole life ahead of her, and for her to be robbed so seemingly thoughtlessly, needlessly, and so cruelly really sparked something in people. I think everyone imagined Aisling, she could be their friend, their daughter. People could really relate to Aisling.
People everywhere were thinking this could have happened to anyone's daughter, anyone's sister, anyone's brother. Young women were thinking, this could have been me, and a lot of them could have been thinking I could have been in that scenario. And loads of people would have gone out for a run on any given day and think, it could have ended like this.
To think that something like this could happen to a young woman in Ireland was bad enough, but to think that it could happen, at the hands of a complete stranger, while this young woman was out exercising in the middle of the day, it really terrified people. And also, in the immediate aftermath, there was a fear out there that there was a killer on the loose.
Gardaí immediately launched a murder investigation, and a crime scene was designated along the stretch of the Grand Canal where Aislinn's body was found in the ditch. It would have been sealed off. The Garda Technical Bureau would have carried out forensic examinations of that scene in the immediate aftermath of the fatal assault.
We have established an incident room at Tullamore Garda Station with a team of over 50 Gardaí assigned to the investigation. Personnel from the National Specialist Units, including the National Bureau of Criminal Investigation, have been assigned to the investigation. No stone will be left unturned in bringing this perpetrator of this crime to justice.
The incident room down in Tullamore was a hive of activity. It was all hands on deck. The investigation to Aisling's murder was in full flow. Gardaí from right across the region were being drafted in. Between 500 and 1,000 jobs were dished out to various members of An Garda Síochána of that investigation team.
Drew Harris has assured the public, saying that there is a national effort behind this investigation in terms of resources. Gardaí from the water unit searching the canal there for any evidence of value, and also local Gardaí combing every inch of that area between Boland's Lock and Digby Bridge for any evidence.
Gardaí also wanted to use the media as best they could to try and get information out there and to appeal for information from the public. And part of that was that they issued a photograph of the bicycle that was found close to Aisling's body.
a key part of the investigation, that Falcon storm bike with distinctive markings and those green fork fronts, as I said, a key element of this investigation.
They wanted to speak to anyone who saw this bike in the vicinity of Tullamore on the day of Aislinn's death.
The guards put out a call for anyone who'd seen that bike. They also had a pretty good description of the man in the ditch with Aisling. That was from 2 eyewitnesses who were running by at the time.
The speed at which this investigation unfolded was particularly fast.
Within hours of Aislinn's body being found, an arrest was made. And this happened on the back of the description.
By that evening, the guards had a suspect in custody whom they held for 24 hours.
He told Gardaí what his alibi was, and Gardaí continued with their investigations, and a big part of that was DNA testing. So at her post-mortem, the pathologist had taken samples from underneath Aisling's fingernails, and those samples were analysed. Gardaí compared that DNA sample to the man that they had arrested, and they found that he wasn't a match. And that was a big setback for the investigation, because that really showed that the person they had arrested was not the person who was responsible.
He had nothing to do with what happened to Aisling. He was completely excluded from their inquiries. And with him released from Garda custody, the stark reality was that her killer was still on the loose.
Yesterday it was a case of people waking up and it was shock and sadness, and today it's a case of people waking up and it's fear that the perpetrator, who people would have thought that was apprehended, is now at large in the community.
Gardaí are doing everything they possibly can and to find the person responsible for this and to bring that person to justice.
Gardaí were under immense pressure to find the person responsible for the death of Aisling.
As the investigation into her death continues, it's also understood that a new person of interest has emerged in the case.
Gardaí in Blanchardstown became aware that a man had presented at St James's Hospital in Dublin. This man was claiming that he had been stabbed in Blanchardstown, so a number of Gardaí went to St James's Hospital to speak to him. This was Jozef Puska.
Major developments in the investigation into the murder of Aisling Murphy. Gardaí here in Tullamore have a new person of interest in their sights. It's understood that he is under surveillance in a hospital.
The morning after Aisling Murphy was murdered, Gardaí in Dublin received information a man had presented at St James's Hospital in Dublin with apparent stab wounds.
Gardaí from Blanchardstown, when they hear that this person has allegedly been stabbed in Blanchardstown the previous day, they come to speak to him, to ask him, get details, find out what exactly happened.
2 Gardaí were dispatched from Blanchardstown to interview him about the incident, and at that stage they believed he was a victim of a crime. So the Gardaí went into the A&E department of St James's Hospital and they spoke with Jozef Puska.
And during the course of that conversation, which took place with an interpreter on loudspeaker, Jozef Puska, obviously being from Slovakia, didn't have great English. And through the course of that conversation, Mr. Puska claimed that he had travelled up from Tullamore the day before.
He claimed that he got a lift to Dublin as far as Euston Station, and from Euston Station he said that he got a taxi to Blanchardstown.
When he got out of the taxi, he claimed that he was set upon by 2 men that he didn't know, and he had very limited descriptions of his 2 alleged attackers. He claimed one of them knocked him to the ground, and he claimed the other one stabbed him. And he said he doesn't know how, but he managed to make it back to his father's apartment in Crumlin. Gardaí then started to, I suppose, ask a few more detailed questions about him. He didn't have an awful lot of detail in relation to this alleged attack, so they started to make further inquiries.
But really, Gardaí felt that there were holes in this story, and they were also looking at the other injuries on Jozef Puska's hands and all over his forehead and face, and these what were described as dark red marks.
They felt that what he was telling them didn't add up. The one detail that did stick out to them was that he said on that day he had travelled to Dublin from Tullamore, and that struck a chord with them because they knew of what had happened in Tullamore. It had been heavily publicised. And so Gardaí from Blanchardstown contacted their colleagues in Tullamore and said, look, there's somebody here maybe you should speak to.
So Detective Sergeant Brian Jennings was one of the officers who was tasked to go to St James's Hospital from Tullamore to speak to Joseph Pushka. And effectively what he said is he wanted an account from Mr. Pushka of what his movements were on January 12th, 2022, the day of Ashleen's murder. The detective and his colleague went to St James's Hospital on the evening of January 13th. Mr. Pushka, they were informed, was in theatre, or he had recently been in theatre and he was in a recovery ward. They were not able to speak to him that evening.
They came back the next day, just after midday, and they did get access to Joseph Pushka on that occasion. They were speaking to him with the aid of a translator, who again was on the mobile phone, and he told them about the incident that he said happened to him in Blanchardstown. So they listened to this story, and again, they thought there were a lot of holes. Finally, they asked him, "Do you have a bike?" And he said, "Yes, I do have a bike, but I haven't had that bike for about 2 weeks. It was stolen from outside my house in Muckla."
He was asked to describe the bicycle. He said that it was black at the back and that it was green at the front. And this certainly sounded very similar to the very distinctive bicycle that was found near Ashleen Murphy's body.
And at that point, Gardaí in Tullamore had obtained a warrant to seize Joseph Pushka's clothing in hospital.
So Detective Jennings returned to speak with Joseph Pushka that evening. He was assisting his colleague, Sergeant Pam Nugent, from Tullamore Garda Station, and she was serving a warrant on St James's Hospital.
She and Detective Sergeant Brian Jennings then went into a private room with Mr. Pushka. He was wheeled into that room in his hospital bed. They described him as being awake, as being alert. He was no longer on any monitors. He didn't seem to be in any discomfort. He didn't seem to be in any pain. They explained the search warrant to him. They explained that they were taking his belongings. They took some clothing that he had in hospital with him. They also took a blood sample from the hospital's lab.
And he asked at that point if he was a suspect in the Ashleen Murphy murder investigation. He was told that he wasn't a suspect, but that he was a person of interest. It was at that point that Joseph Pushka paused, and they described it as a notable pause, and they said that he was like someone who was thinking.
Mr. Pushka asked the interpreter to translate something word for word to the two sergeants in the hospital room. He said, "I did it, I murdered, I am the murderer." Things shifted very quickly because he was no longer a person of interest. He was now a suspect who was making a very serious confession to a very serious crime.
The sergeant said that he immediately cautioned Joseph Pushka and told him that he didn't have to say anything further. But Mr. Pushka did go on.
Detective Hogan was sitting there and he said that Mr. Pushka then started to again speak freely. As soon as he started talking, Detective Hogan said that he told him that he didn't have to speak to him, that his solicitor was on the way, that they were making arrangements, but that didn't stop Mr. Pushka from telling him what he felt he needed to say.
He started describing to the Garda how he had carried out the stabbing. Detective Garda told the trial that he did not ask Joseph Pushka to come forward with this information. But as Anne-Marie Lawler, prosecution counsellor, would later put it opening the trial, she said that Joseph Pushka had come forward with information about how Ashleen Murphy had died that at that point no one else knew. And she's described this as very significant.
So Joseph Pushka remained in hospital for a further 5 days after he had made that alleged admission. So on the 18th, he was due to be discharged from the hospital, and Gardaí had decided long before that as soon as he was to be discharged, they were going to arrest him. They handcuffed him and they put him in the back of a Garda car, and they drove him to Tullamore Garda Station.
I was asked to go to Tullamore District Court on the day that Joseph Pushka was due to be charged. Now, when I got there, he was still in Garda custody, so we didn't know at that point what stage, if he was going to appear that evening or not. We then gathered at the courthouse, and there was a big media gathering there, reporters, photographers, TV crews, and this we all witnessed the ugly scenes that transpired. When a person is held in custody on suspicion of murder, the law dictates that they either be released or charged by a certain time. If the DPP's instructions are that they be charged, they have to more or less appear in court almost immediately. So there was a very small window between Joseph Pushka being released from his custody and appearing in court. He was in court about half an hour after the DPP instructed that he be charged. So the Guardian didn't really have enough time to put in place a crowd control operation.
A large group of people had assembled to demonstrate, I suppose, their anger about what had happened.
He was escorted in by a number of Gardaí, and he was met with a barrage of insults. People were screaming at him, people were calling him names. Gardaí had to push people back as they tried to make a route inside the front door of the courthouse.
And he was heckled as he was brought into the hearing. It was a very brief hearing. Evidence was given of arrest, charge and caution.
People wearing a COVID face mask and stood there in the dock. There were relatives of Aisling Murphy's family were standing at the back of the court, and they were holding up photographs of Aisling, and that's a scene I've never witnessed before in any courtroom. And at that point, the enormity of what he had done and the impact it was going to have on so many people, including his own family, must have hit home to him.
It looked like a mob gathering outside at the courthouse, waiting for Joseph Pushka.
People were very angry, emotions were running very high.
And there was a lot of noticeable, palpable anger there towards Mr. Pushka because of what they believed he had done at that point.
And then he had to be brought back out of the courthouse and back into that Garda van.
The atmosphere in court was very tense. It certainly reflects just how sad, desperately sad this case was, how senseless Aisling's death was.
In the main body of the court were Aisling's family. They occupied 2 full benches every day. Mum, Kathleen, Dad, Raymond, Amy, Cole, and then of course Aisling's beloved partner, Ryan Casey.
You could hear a pin drop in this packed courtroom when Joseph Pushka rose to his feet in the dock and the charge was put to him and he pleaded not guilty.
If you're an accused person facing a trial, you have to expect to be doing at least 20 years if you're convicted. Obviously, if you go to fight a case and if you're successful in terms of a not guilty verdict, well then you walk away. So there's obviously a huge possible advantage to you there. And some people just might be prepared to take the risk.
The evidence in this case was so overwhelming against Joseph Pushka, it was so compelling, but he still felt that in many ways, that he was in a position to fight it. That alone tells you what he actually thinks about Aisling Murphy's family and what they've been through since the beginning of this process. And it epitomised the kind of person that he is. He had zero regard for them whatsoever throughout all of this. He had no remorse, no empathy, and he thought that he could get off with murder.
Deborah, will you take us through what's been happening in court this morning?
Yes, Colette. Well, opening the trial for the prosecution a short time ago, Senior Counsel Anne-Marie Lawler said shortly after midday on January 12th last year, Joseph Pushka is seen on CCTV footage aimlessly meandering through the town of Tullamore on his bicycle.
Compilation of CCTV footage that had been created out of over 25,000 hours of harvested footage was shown to the jurors.
He left home about midday on his bike, and CCTV footage picks him up at a school in Mucklagh, St. Coleman's National School, and he's cycling by on his way into Tullamore town.
He cycled around a couple of different locations by the Tullamore Court Hotel. He was spotted again then cycling in very close proximity, very, very slowly, behind a woman named Beata Borowska as she was heading towards the Tesco supermarket that's out at the Tullamore retail part at the end of Church Road.
When she went into Tesco, he did a U-turn and went back towards Tullamore. Beata Borowska was totally unaware that somebody was behind her that day. There was also another woman whom Jozef Puska was seen to be following, Anne-Marie Kelly.
She was out walking her dog at 2 p.m. She became aware of a man following behind her.
Jozef Puska could be seen on this CCTV footage at the Church Road roundabout in Tullamore as Anne-Marie Kelly crosses that road with the dog heading towards the canal for her walk. Jozef Puska is seen crossing at roughly the same spot where she crossed the road and then cycling very slowly behind her.
She kind of moved in on the footpath to give him an opportunity to pass her by, but she said that he didn't pass her by, he stayed cycling right behind her. So she walked on another little bit and she decided to stop then, again leaving a gap for this person to pass, and she said at that point he did pass, but as he passed he stared straight at her.
She met Jozef Puska again that afternoon when she went to the Grand Canal to continue her exercise.
She said that the encounter had made her feel uncomfortable. She walked down to that same Diane Road car park where Aisling Murphy would also arrive. And she said this man then was walking behind her, very closely behind her, pushing the bicycle the whole time. She stopped to tie her shoelace and to get her dog's attention, and he overtook her at that point. Because she didn't want another encounter with this man, she made a decision that she was going to start running and she was going to run by him. She would not make eye contact with him and not try to have any interaction with him whatsoever. But she arrived at Digby Bridge a few minutes after that, and that seems to have been quite a busy place. She met quite a number of people there, but in particular she met one person who stuck out in her memory. I think she said it was the last person who she saw there. And she described this person as being very smiley, very chatty, and very nice young woman. She knelt down to pet the dog and asked what breed it was. She said she just seemed like a really nice, smiley, chatty, happy young person. It would appear was one of the last sightings actually of Aisling before she died.
Jenna Stack and Eva Marin were significant, crucial witnesses for the prosecution.
Both primary school teachers also, they were going out for a run on the afternoon of January 12th, 2022.
They were about halfway through their run when they saw a bike just pushed into the bushes. It wasn't thrown down, Jenna Stack said. She said someone seemed to have placed it quite deliberately in the bushes.
They thought it was unusual. It was a nice bike. They wondered why somebody had left it there. They continued on their run, but they hadn't got very far when she heard some noises coming from the hedgerow. These noises gave her some cause for concern. She was certain it wasn't an animal. She approached the hedgerow and she started shouting, "There's somebody in there."
She saw a man crouched over, down in the ditch. At first she believed that he might have fallen off the bike and that he might have been injured.
She said that she could clearly see this person crouching over another person. She couldn't see the upper half of this person, but she could see the lower half. She could tell from what this person was wearing that it was a girl.
She described how she saw the woman who was pinned down by the man, that the woman was unable to speak. She wasn't making any sound, but it was like she was crying for help.
And her legs were kicking really hard. She said she was kicking from her core, using her body in any way she could to try and get help.
Ms. Stack said that Jozef Puska turned around to her through gritted teeth and said, "Get away." She just described this as absolutely terrifying.
She threatened to call the guards. She hoped that would scare the man off, that he would perhaps get off this girl and leave her alone. But it didn't work. It didn't deter the man. He actually lunged at them as if to frighten them, and at that point, they ran to get help.
Jenna Stack gave a very vivid description of what she had seen that day. But it was put to her by defence counsel Michael Bowman, who's representing Mr. Puska, that perhaps what she had seen was his client, Mr. Puska, assisting Miss Murphy. That he wasn't the attacker, he wasn't the assailant, that he was trying to help her.
When all of this was put to her, she said no. She said that she could tell from the way that the girl was kicking out, from the scene that was unfolding in front of her, that this girl was in complete distress.
Earlier, the court heard Gardaí attempted CPR at the scene where the 23-year-old was found in January last year, but couldn't resuscitate the school teacher.
Aisling's body was taken from the scene to Tullamore General Hospital, where it was examined by state pathologist Dr. Sally-Ann Collis.
The results of her post-mortem were presented to the jury, and it took her almost 2 hours to deliver her findings. Such, I suppose, was the amount of injuries suffered by Aisling Murphy. Heartbreakingly, she said that Aisling may have had defensive wounds, that she had fought her attacker. She had fought Jozef Puska right up until the end.
The pathologist had taken samples from underneath Aisling's fingernails, and those samples were analysed, and they returned a DNA sample.
But a number of items were removed from the crime scene to subsequently be forensically examined. A mountain bike was found close to the vicinity where Aisling's body was found.
DNA that was a match for Jozef Puska was found on the handlebars and gear mechanism of the bike, and also a fingerprint that was a perfect match for his right ring finger was found on the underside of the saddle.
It's very unusual for a defendant in a murder trial in Ireland to take the witness stand in their own defence, but that's what Jozef Puska did. He sat up in the witness box, he had his translator to his left-hand side. He was quite confident in what he was saying. His demeanour was even cocky.
And he basically was asked by his defence barrister, Michael Bowman, to take us through the day of January 12th, 2022. He told what the prosecution would later put it as a cock and bull story.
He said that he'd been cycling along the canal, minding his own business, trying to get a bit of exercise, when a person he did not know, who was wearing a COVID mask and dressed in black, started shouting at him and pushed Jozef Puska from his bike. He described the man stabbing him 3 times in the stomach. Aisling Murphy, he said, walked into this situation and she said something to this man, and Puska described this person then turning his attentions to Aisling. According to Jozef Puska's story, this man then just ran away in the direction of the M52 and appears to have just disappeared. Puska says that he then went over to Aisling. He tried to help her by pulling her scarf up over her injuries, but he realised he couldn't do anything for her, and so instead of trying to help her or trying to get any help for her, he climbed through those briars and those thorns and went off into a field.
He was cross-examined by Anne-Marie Lawler. She picked holes in his story all over the place. She said to him, "You're an inveterate liar." Even when he was being led by his own defence counsel, Michael Bowman, his story was farcical. It was nonsensical.
And we know that the man who he claimed to have attacked him before attacking Aisling did not exist. This was a lie, so I think it's fair to say that those wounds were inflicted by himself.
This man had made a confession. He had Aisling's DNA under his fingernails. Eyewitnesses had placed him at the scene, and crucially, he was stalking at least 2 other women on the day that he killed Aisling.
It was presumably a very hurtful lie for Aisling's killer to tell in front of Aisling's family, but that was what Jozef Puska came up with months after this happened. When other witnesses were present, like Jenna Stack, like Aoife Maron, he didn't call out to them and say, "Oh, somebody's after attacking me." He didn't say that to Gardaí when he was in St. James's Hospital a couple of days later. He didn't say it to Gardaí after he'd been arrested 6 days after the murder on the 18th of January. All he ever said was that he'd never seen Aisling before, never met her before. That was the first anyone ever heard of this idea that there was this COVID-compliant killer wearing a COVID mask, dressed in black, who stabbed Aisling and also stabbed Jozef Puska and then disappeared into a puff of smoke. Whenever a verdict is coming in a murder trial, there is a very tense atmosphere, and there was a tense atmosphere in courtroom 13 in the Criminal Courts Justice Building when it became clear that the jury had returned a verdict
By the time word filtered through the criminal courts of justice that a verdict was imminent, the jury had only been deliberating for about 2 hours. It was at about 2:05 when the juryminder came into court 13 to tell the registrar that the jury had a verdict. Aisling's family quickly filed back into the courtroom. They were in about a minute afterward, got out. Her mother, Kathleen, holding this beautiful framed photograph of Aisling, holding it tight. Josef Pushka was then brought back in from the holding cell a few minutes later. The jury foreperson was asked if they had reached an agreement. He said that they had. He then handed over the issue paper to the registrar. Time froze as the registrar opened up that issue paper to reveal the juror's decision. Guilty. A word that Aisling Murphy's family had been waiting to hear for the best part of 2 years. In fact, 666 days since Aisling Murphy was stolen from them.
There was an audible sigh of relief, I think, from the Murphy family.
Overcome by emotion, they sobbed, they embraced each other. I noticed Kathleen raising Aisling's photo a little bit higher. It danced around the public gallery.
And Mr. Justice Tony Hunt told the jurors that they had made the right decision, and he had urged them in this trial to return a verdict in accordance with the evidence. And he said that he was glad that they didn't waste any more of their time on Josef Pushka's nonsense, as he put it.
We have even in this room the words of the judge who presided over Josef Pushka's trial moments after a jury found Pushka guilty of murdering Aisling Murphy as she went for a run along the Grand Canal outside Tullamore in January of last year. Mr. Justice Tony Hunt also said there would be a day of reckoning for the accused.
After the verdict was given in the murder trial, Ryan Casey and Aisling's brother Cahill came out onto the steps of the Central Criminal Court, and they faced a bank of cameras, tens of journalists, and they gave a very emotional and heartfelt statement.
Aisling was subject to incomprehensible violence by a predator who is not known to her. While we do not glory in any conviction, we recognise the importance of holding accountable those who would commit such terrible atrocities. The judicial process cannot bring our darling Aisling back, nor can it heal our wounds. But we are relieved that this verdict delivers justice. It is simply imperative that this vicious monster can never harm another woman again.
Aisling was a vibrant, intelligent, and highly motivated young woman who embodied so many great traits and qualities of the Irish people and its communities. Her life had a huge impact on so many of those around her, and she was the epitome of a perfect role model for every little girl to look up to and strive to be. She was not only an integral part of our family, but she was also a huge shining light in our community.
That was a very, very difficult thing for the family to do. They showed great strength and bravery by doing it. Directly behind them was row after row after row of family members and friends, all there in solidarity for the Murphy family, all there in memory of Aisling.
That was the first time in 22 months that we got to see and hear from the Murphy family. Senior counsel Anne-Marie Lawler said, jarring as it may be, the trial would not be about Aisling Murphy. The trial was about Josef Pushka. Once that verdict came in, the focus was shifted back to Aisling and to this beautiful young person who had been taken from her family, friends, and her community far too soon in the most tragic of circumstances.
Mr. Justice Hunt said that he hoped that the family would give victim impact statements at Josef Pushka's sentence hearing so that he and the court and the country could get a better flavour of who Aisling Murphy was
as Ashling's killer was jailed for life today. The young school teacher's boyfriend also delivered a powerful victim impact statement to the sentencing hearing, in which he turned directly to Josef Pushka and told him he'd robbed him of the chance to marry his soulmate.
Our house was alive with music every night as she played her fiddle. I miss her sweet music in our home. It breaks my heart. As a parent, you want your child to go out into this world and live a full and meaningful life, yet being acutely aware of how fragile their safety is, wanting to protect them. I couldn't protect my darling Aisling, and now she's gone forever.
Aisling's name and her legacy will be remembered far beyond the name of her killer, and I think that her short life will be celebrated beyond her death. I suppose a lot of people were also asking, well, as a society, what can we learn from Aisling's death, and what can we take from this and ensure that it does not happen again to another innocent victim?
Particularly that this could have been anybody that we know. This could have been any one of our sisters or our daughters, our best friends. A lot of people kind of were seriously affected by it because it genuinely could have happened to anybody.
The reaction to Ashling's murder did kind of light a fire under the government, and they did feel, rightly so, that they needed to speed up their reactions. We were just in the middle of developing a national strategy on domestic sexual and gender-based violence, and that was finalised in the months after Aisling's death. We now have an offence about stalking, and we also have an offence in relation to non-fatal strangulation.
As of November 2023, an introduction of new laws and of tougher sentences in relation to gender-based violence and sexual violence and domestic violence. Aisling's death did really spur this country to have a conversation about violence.
This is not about one bad apple and eradicating violence in that way. This is systemic, and it comes from gender inequality. It's fueled by misogyny, and it affects women at all stages of their lives.
This needs to be a pivotal point, and violence against women needs to come to an end. However, since Aisling was murdered, 18 women have died violently, so I think many would also say progress has been made, but there is still a lot of work to be done.
For many, many, many months, those conversations were silenced, but thankfully as soon as the jury came back with the correct verdict, it was able to bring the focus back to Aisling Murphy.
She was a shining light in her community. Everybody knew her, and by all accounts, everybody loved her. The picture that is painted of her by her friends and family is of a really warm, open person, a person who wanted to give back, but also a serious person, a person who was serious about education, teaching them not only in the school in Durrow, but she also taught them at the weekends traditional music.
She was a very talented traditional Irish musician, very well known for playing the fiddle. She loved traditional Irish music. She also had a great love of GAA from a very young age. She was very active with her beloved club, Kilcormac Calahi. In fact, in the wake of her death, the team wore training tops with the number 23 emblazoned on the front of the shirts. Aisling's memory will also live on, and her legacy will go on through the various funds that have been set up in her name, the scholarship that was set up at Mary Immaculate College, where she had just graduated as a primary school teacher. And of course, the family have set up a memorial fund, again, to enhance and develop traditional Irish music in this country. What a lovely testament to all of the things that were special and close to Aisling Murphy. And we're talking about somebody who was just 23 years of age, so young, but had already achieved so much. She gave back. So many people take from their communities, but Aisling Murphy gave back. in spades.
Tonight, on Wood TV 8, an hour-long Target 8 investigation. Left in Blood, the Kathy Swartz murder. Here's Brian Sterling.
The killer of 19-year-old Kathy Swartz left behind more than just his victim's baby unharmed in the room down the hall. There was also a fingerprint left in blood and a bloody footprint. And what of the cryptic message left on Kathy's leg? It's all there in crime scene videos recently obtained by Target 8. In a special report, Target 8 investigators Ken Kolker and Carter Gent examine a murder investigation that spanned more than 3 decades. For the first time, we'll take you to the moment it was finally solved. And we do want to warn you that some of the images and video in tonight's report are disturbing. Ken Kolker is here now with our special report, Left in Blood, the Kathy Swartz murder.
Brian, from the start, detectives were certain they had all they needed to quickly solve Kathy Swartz's brutal murder. But along the way, some evidence was lost. Opportunities were missed. An innocent man was left living under suspicion for nearly 35 years, until new DNA science came along. You talk about, walking up the stairs. I read the police report. Said you saw blood on the railing coming up.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's all over the wall. Smeared all over. Walls everywhere. Yeah.
I talked to her every day. We would talk on the phone. Neither one of us had a car, but we would talk on the phone every day. We would hang out together. We would make plans together. And it was just gone. Just like that.
Who's this?
This is Buddy.
Oh, not just your buddy, but his buddy.
Yeah.
There's no telling where life will take you once you've seen the worst that life can offer. It was just a couple of miles away. And 35 years ago, Kathy Swartz, her baby Courtney, and her fiancé shared a small 2-story apartment at Riverside Townhouses, a gathering of tidy brick and aluminum-sided rentals on the edge of Three Rivers. It was December 2nd, 1988, just 3 weeks before Courtney's very first Christmas. Mike Warner, the man Kathy planned to marry, told police he came home from work mid-afternoon, as always, expecting to find her watching her favorite soap opera.
It's all over the wall. Smeared all over. Walls everywhere. Yeah. Wow. It's like painted on.
Really?
That bad, yeah. Yep.
His fiancée, dead in an upstairs bedroom. Kathy's daughter Courtney, the child he planned to help raise, was standing in her crib, unharmed, in another room, barely old enough to stand on her own. Police say it appeared that someone recently had changed the baby's diaper.
I just wish I could have got to meet her. Or like know her, you know. It hurts.
Courtney is now 35, a mother herself. She knows what she knows about her mom and her murder from her mom's parents who raised her, and later from police reports.
I remember my whole life, like just going to the store or like anywhere, seeing people and just wondering, like, I wonder if that's who killed my mom.
The man behind the camera capturing this awful video that day was Michigan State Police crime scene tech Ken Lanigan.
One of the bloodier scenes we've been to, you could see, she was definitely probably fighting for her life and struggling because there was blood down in the kitchen area and up the stairway and on the walls.
Kathy had been beaten and strangled before her throat was cut, left to die in her bedroom. From the start, former prosecutor Jeffrey Middleton worked closely with police on the investigation. It became the most time-consuming case of his career.
A young woman is killed in her apartment, and her 9-month-old baby's in a playpen, and it's in your town, and everybody knows about it, and people are frightened about it. And she deserved better than that. She deserved to have it solved.
On the pink phone in Kathy's bedroom, crime scene technicians found a bloody fingerprint. The phone line had been cut.
Besides the bloody fingerprint on the phone, there was a blood kind of water mixture footprint on the bathroom floor. And it appeared as though the suspect had washed up or taken a shower afterwards to clean up.
The bath water still running when investigators took this crime scene video hours later. The killer left behind a size 9 left bare footprint in blood. Like fingers, the toes and the balls of the feet have distinct prints.
Having a footprint, not a shoe print, but a footprint, bare footprint in blood was, unusual.
The crime scene quickly went from grisly to bizarre. The crime scene techs were using a new piece of equipment for the first time that illuminated evidence not visible to the naked eye.
When we hit it was that alternate light source that said Metallica and the name Harley on the refrigerator.
Specifically, Harley was here. They moved the light over Kathy's body.
In examining her body, looking for hairs and fibers, we found writing on the inside of her thigh. And it said, "I was here." But
written on her thigh.
Written on her thigh.
Not on her clothes.
No,
on her skin.
On her skin. It kind of blew our minds. We'd never seen anything like that before.
She was very careful. And I would call her and I'd say, hey, I'm going to come over, which took me all of 5 minutes to get over there. And her door wasn't unlocked, even though she knew I was coming. Same thing, knock. Hey, it's me. So there's no way she would have let anybody in that she didn't know.
He didn't probably come in like a wild-eyed killer. He came in and said, hey, how you doing? Can I come in? And then, or went south from there. He was there with the intent to try to have a relationship with her, and she wasn't interested, and that's when it turned into a homicide.
Kathy Swartz had no known enemies. She grew up on a 2-acre farm in nearby Mendon, a tiny village wedged between cornfields on a bend of the St. Joseph River. She was in Girl Scouts 4-H, had a pony when she was 8. Her class of 1987 at Mendon High School was so small that it barely filled 2 pages of the yearbook. There she is in the 9th grade, not far from her good friend Jennifer.
We went to school together the whole time. Mendon's a very small
Kathy's family moved to Three Rivers before her senior year. Her dad ran the pro shop at the local bowling alley where Kathy bowled in a league with her mom. She worked for a time at the local Burger King. In March 1988, at the age of 18, after dropping out of high school, Kathy gave birth to Courtney.
She was pregnant a few months after I was, and, kind of bonded us again, brought us together. I'd take my daughter over there, and we'd hang out, and the girls would be on the floor, and she was just a very loving person all around, so I knew she'd be a good mom.
And she says she loved her fiancé, Mike Warner. Courtney was just 6 months old when the two met in September 1988. They got engaged on November 10th, 3 weeks before the murder. He worked at a nearby paper plant.
Could Mike have done something like this?
Absolutely not. There was never even a thought that he could have ever done anything like that. No. I mean, he loved her. There would have never been a situation that I would have ever thought he did it.
The night before the murder, Kathy and her fiancé ate fish and chips, played a couple of board games, Sorry and Payday, before turning in at midnight. Kathy kissed him goodbye, he told police, still in her nightshirt, when he left for work at 5:25 the next morning. He got home at 3:30 that afternoon to discover the blood in Kathy's body. He ran to a neighbor who called police, then ran back inside to get the baby. Three Rivers Police Detective Kenny Baker was among the first on the scene.
Somebody moved the body from work. She was still on the floor with her head up towards the head of the bed because the blood splattered on the wall. Took the body and turned it around 180 degrees, pulled it out to the doorway so she could look at the baby and the baby.
The autopsy revealed 3 cuts on her neck that caused massive blood loss. It also showed that she was strangled, beaten, and suffered cuts on her hands, defensive wounds. The listed cause of death was the deep cut to her neck and strangulation. While police did not find a murder weapon, they did find this, what appears to be the outline of a pair of scissors in blood on a pair of sweatpants.
I know she fought for her life. I know it. I mean, she was little, but she fought till her last breath.
It appeared the killer, after showering, escaped past the fully decorated Christmas tree, over the stuffed Muppets, and out the back door, knocking down a candy cane along the way. Neighbors saw nothing that could help.
If he's killing my mom, it's noisy. I'm not screaming, I'm not crying, nobody hears me, nobody hears the ruckus that's going on in the apartment.
The medical examiner told police that based on the color of the bruises, the beating likely lasted 15 minutes. They figured she died shortly after noon. As for baby Courtney, she was clean and no longer in her PJs, instead wearing pants, a shirt, and one Cabbage Patch sock. Her disposable diaper was only damp.
We wondered, that thought maybe her diaper had been changed.
After the break, what about those mysterious messages on Kathy Schwartz's refrigerator? Or those messages on her body? Would any of this lead to her killer? Back to our story, Kathy Schwartz is found murdered in her apartment. Strange writing on her refrigerator and on her body. The focus turns quickly to her fiancé.
Quickly rolled out. Well, he was real hard to get a handle on. He just lost his girlfriend. His apartment is all in disarray, and he was like a very little affect. It's like, yeah, that's too bad.
Yeah, but they were on me every day.
Were they?
Every day, yeah, I'm saying. They thought I knew who did it. I didn't,
Well, they thought you knew who did it.
Yeah, they kept pressuring me. You told us who did that,
There was never even a thought that he could have ever done anything like that.
But you had an alibi.
Yeah, but I was at work that day.
About a half hour away, Lakeland, Paper, and Sturgis. And most importantly, his prints did not match. Even with the fiancé all but eliminated as a suspect, police remain confident.
Basically left his calling card, right? A fingerprint and a bloody footprint. 2 calling cards.
2, yeah.
And they had those handwritten messages. I was here on Kathy's leg, and Metallica, and Harley was here on the refrigerator. And what do you know? Kathy's ex-boyfriend, 19-year-old Troy Schulteis, was a huge fan of Metallica. And he loved Harley-Davidson motorcycles so much that it earned him a nickname, Harley. He even had a Harley sticker on the back window of his Ford Ranger.
I said Troy did it. I mean, that's the first person that popped into my mind. That's what I told the police.
There were reports, according to court records, of a rocky relationship. Even Schulteis' mom had heard that.
Said, like he was mean to her and all that. I mean, that's somebody's word against his. I mean, I don't have anything whether it's ever true or not.
It also didn't help that Harley had no alibi.
There was a witness that saw his truck there that very afternoon at the end of the school day.
His arrest 3 days after the murder made headlines. Harley, who had no criminal past, denied the killing. As for the refrigerator calligraphy, he told police that he had drawn it with a red marker months earlier at a party and had wiped it off, which would explain why it was no longer visible to the naked eye.
The same time you wrote on the refrigerator, Metallica and all that stuff, is when you said you wrote on the right.
Detectives, still confident they had their killer, sent Harley's fingerprints and footprints to the State Police Crime Lab in Grand Rapids.
Harley was arrested and they got his fingerprints and footprints, and I think they hand delivered them to me as soon as they got them. And so they want me to compare them, and they're thinking this is our guy, and I'm looking at the prints, and it's not him. I can't identify the prints to him. They're not him. Are you sure? Can you look again? Yeah. And it's, well, you can look at it all day long again, but it's not going to change. It's not him. So they then immediately released him from jail.
9 days after his arrest. But the suspicion followed Harley for years.
He quit in senior year in high school. He quit because of that.
Undeterred, detectives worked down their list of possible suspects, including this man, also from Kathy's past, Michael Howard, a person of interest with a possible motive. In a paternity suit filed by the state, Kathy identified Howard as Courtney's father. 4 days after the murder, a court-ordered paternity test came back. Positive. Michael Howard was the dad. Did you guys look at him?
Yeah, oh, yes. Same thing. It wasn't his fingerprint. It wasn't his footprint.
The baby daddy also had a solid alibi. Kathy's fiancé says he also gave detectives the name of an old elementary school buddy, Robert Waters, who had visited their apartment a month before the murder.
I ran into him in the grocery store, I believe, and invited him over. He came over one night.
But Waters, who was 19 at the time, had moved to Arizona before the murder. Another name crossed off the list. Then, this bizarre turn. On the same day of the murder, and at nearly the exact time, a car speeding out of Three Rivers plunged into the St. Joseph River. It took a half hour for rescuers to pull 24-year-old Christina Shelton and her 3-year-old daughter from the submerged car. The next day, the murder and fatal crash shared the front page. But what the initial stories didn't say, the deceased driver and Kathy Swartz were neighbors.
Same apartment complex.
And almost the same time of day?
Yes, about noon on Friday. She left the apartment for reasons unknown and was headed toward Centerville. She had her daughter in the car, and she was driving along the river, and she went in the river and drowned, and they saved the daughter. And the speculation always was that she saw something that was upsetting to her, and she took off.
Police compared footprints and fingerprints on the woman's birth certificate against those left by the killer. Make sure she wasn't the killer.
She wasn't the killer.
But you still don't know if she maybe saw the suspect was being chased.
Right. And I don't know to this day whether those two things were connected or not.
Police also released this composite of a woman spotted in the area who they believed was either the suspect or an accomplice. It generated no leads. With the obvious suspects all but eliminated, detectives grew desperate. Every day for 6 months, the lead detective staked out the cemetery where Kathy is buried, hoping the killer would pay her a visit.
On the anniversary of her killing, the 1 year anniversary event, it took 3 days before we could get it out. From the trailer back over off from the gravesite, and that's where we found this guy. He had a friendship ring that he got from Kathy in elementary school. And after she was buried, he went out and dug a little spot and buried the ring. It's a friendship ring. And we got him on video.
The detective described the man as shy, bashful, and a bit withdrawn. Another side-by-side comparison of prints, another suspect eliminated.
So the fingerprint and footprint were almost like this get-out-of-jail-free card, right?
Yes, it was.
Within 3 years of the killing, police had fingerprinted and taken footprints of more than 1,000 people and said they had 3,000 to go. The footprint, like Cinderella's glass slipper, with police looking for an exact fit.
Everyone cooperated because they didn't do it. We thought the first time someone says no, we're going to focus the light on them and see what we need to do. But no one said no.
And they eliminated seemingly everyone, even convicted child killer Daniel Furlong, rightfully considered the creepiest man in St. Joseph County.
My grandpa thought it was a cop, like it was a cover-up.
There were a lot of rumors going on back then that the police were involved in this. Did you hear those?
Oh, all the time. In fact, people will still say it.
But the former prosecutor says that every Three Rivers officer was printed and all were eliminated.
When this first happened, we had this great forensic evidence that we're going to solve this by the first of the year. And then we made an arrest and it isn't the right guy. Now we're going to solve it by the end of the year. Now we're going to solve it within 2 years, and then it's 5 years and 10 years, and then all of a sudden it was 30 years.
Also, several years after the murder, former Michigan State Police crime scene tech Ken Lanninga was onto his new assignment, investigating car thefts, when he found himself in Three Rivers.
I pulled into the driveway there, and I immediately remembered that was the apartment complex where Kathy had been killed. So I sat in the parking lot, and I remember just praying to God that case could get solved.
I remember just when I was little, like praying to God, like, please let me find out who did this.
After the break, years of frustration and lost evidence leads to doubts. With few solid leads, it appeared Kathy Schwartz's killer would get away with it.
I kept thinking, it's in here. I'm just not seeing it, that it's in here.
Courtney Schwartz was 9 months old when her mom was killed in the room next door, a murder she doubted would ever be solved. Ken Kolker continues his investigation.
Courtney was raised by her mom's parents, David and Audrey Schwartz, Pops and Mama Augie. Reports in probate court tracked her childhood, the puppy she got for Christmas, the visits to her mom at the cemetery, the swing set for her birthday, a girl who knew her numbers by the time she was 3, grandparents who loved her. But when she was little, there was a distance between her and her grandfather.
I think my grandpa kind of thought I looked a lot like my mom and kind of like tried to occupy his mind, not on that.
But they grew closer as she grew up. He became dad.
We ended up getting really, really close as I got older. My grandpa was like he ended up being my best friend.
She was in the first grade when Pops and Grandma Augie first told her about her mom.
They sat me down on the bed and they told me, we gotta talk to you like about your mom if you wanna know. And I said, well, yeah, I wanna know. And they told me that a bad man hurt my mom and that she was up in heaven.
Then in the 4th grade, they sat her down again.
They actually told me that my mom was murdered. Somebody entered the apartment and beat her really bad. She had just had like a root canal done, and that is the side that she was mostly beaten on. Then they slit her neck from ear to ear. I stayed home from school that day, and
How does a little girl handle something like that?
I don't know. Like I just took it in, and I just tried to live like a normal kid.
She was 16 when her pop sat her down with a box of police reports and newspaper stories on the murder.
I feel like I want to know everything. Like that's my mom, you know. Like I don't know. I want to know everything. So I read it. I guess I just wanted to feel like some closure to her. I guess like some close. I don't know, but I read it, and it's very awful.
Courtney had her first child when she was 19, living scared, she says, in her first apartment on her own in Constantine, thinking about her mom.
And all I could think about is this gonna happen to me too? Or like, and I used to sleep with like knives in my drawer, like by my bed, and like I still do.
She, like most in town, feared the detectives would never solve her mom's murder. A jumble of 10,000 yellowing pages of police reports in boxes. Task force after task force, getting nowhere.
After so long and so many stories, and like there would be leads, they'd be like, oh, we got a lead, and then nothing else again. And that went on for like a long time.
Middleton, who was then the prosecutor, occasionally locked himself in his office, poring over reports.
I kept thinking, it's in here. I'm just not seeing it, that it's in here. And it was. And I didn't see it.
Through all of this, police kept coming back to Troy Schulteis, the ex-boyfriend who loved Metallica and went by Harley, even calling him a viable person of interest years later.
Were you shocked when they arrested him?
No. I was shocked when he was let go, because I was like, what? Because then it's like, well, who was it then?
In 2012, members of the new task force sat down with the original detective, Kenny Baker, who was fighting cancer.
I got 2 of each one and 1 up in my chest.
Baker's partner in the original investigation remained certain that Harley was the killer.
He was sure Troy did it, but the fingerprints and footprints were Troy. So that means there had to be a second party to probably come back during the day.
Police had heard rumors that the second party was Harley's father. His father died before detectives could check his prints.
So we never got those fingerprints or footprints. There was no evidence that Mr. Schulteis had helped Troy, but the rumor was.
Schulteis sued police in federal court, claiming they had ruined his reputation, but a judge tossed the suit.
Clearly, he was under this cloud of suspicion.
Yes, he was. And I guess that's unfair.
So more than 20 years after the murder, in an interview room at Three Rivers PD, the new detectives were sitting down with the cop who was there from the start, spitballing, speculating, testing his memory.
My memory's pretty good when it comes to this stuff for a long time.
They asked for his theories.
It might be all right. That's what you need to give us other avenues to look at.
And they asked, what about all the evidence that was lost? The bloody shower curtains, video from Kathy's funeral, the 35mm camera from Kathy's bedroom. Tough to solve a case without all the evidence. And while the new detective still had that unknown fingerprint left in blood on the phone, What about the other prints lifted from the rest of the apartment?
And if there was a print, I left it. So where are all those things at? All I know is this, sometimes there's a box full of prints that were taken out, they're all marked where they came from.
And the new detectives revealed to him what they saw as new evidence.
So we recently just discovered that there is a blood stain on that same telephone that did not belong to the victim, did not belong to Mike Warner, did not belong to Schultz, did not belong to Mike Howard. First found the actual mail. It's in the CODIS at this point in time as of 2 months ago, so we're not going to get it.
Police hope that CODIS, the combined DNA index system, would match the newly discovered DNA to one of the thousands of profiles from known criminals at other crime scenes across the country.
And that was probably was the most frustrating for anyone involved working the case. We knew we had the fingerprint and footprint, and then later as DNA developed, but originally out of the gate, knew we had the killer's fingerprint and footprint. But
so you're thinking, gonna solve this pretty quick?
Well, that was the hope, yes.
Yeah. There's no way detectives thought that this could be a one and done. The killer had to have left his fingerprints or DNA at some other crime scene, before or after. The original detective was certain that the killer was still alive.
You got DNA, you got footprint. Why do you use a person's name?
Finally, in May 2022, the Michigan State Police Crime Lab DNA director in Grand Rapids suggested one last chance to solve the decades-old case. The state police sent a frozen DNA sample from Kathy's pink phone to a fledgling forensics genome sequencing lab known as Othram in suburban Houston, Texas.
The kind of cases we work are the cases where there is no hope left. There's nothing else that can be done.
The standard CODIS test looks at 20 DNA markers, enough to match with a known suspect or find a close relative. But Othram scientists build DNA profiles based on hundreds of thousands of markers.
So if you have a small number of markers, you're only going to get very close relationships. If you have a large number of markers, which is what we have built, then you are getting really distant relatives, like sixth cousins, fifth cousins, fourth cousins, relatives you do not know whatsoever.
Othram enters the detailed DNA profile into public genealogical databases to find distant relatives. The team narrows the search through birth, marriage, and death records to finish building a family tree. By January 2023, using that blood on Kathy's phone, Othram had narrowed it down. Her killer was one of 4 sons of John and Judith Waters, who had raised their family just north of Three Rivers.
How does that feel in a case like this where you can call them and say, we've got you a lead? They haven't had a lead in 35 years.
It's the most incredible feeling in the world to know that you can help bring answers to someone's family that has been waiting for them for so long.
After the break, new DNA technology had narrowed the list of suspects down to 4 brothers. But which one?
Like I said on the phone, my name is Sam Smallcombe. I'm the detective here. And I'm working on a cold case from 1988.
New DNA technology brought investigators to the brink of something that had seemed impossible, solving the 1988 murder of Kathy Swartz. The killer had to be one of 4 sons of a couple that had raised their family just outside of Three Rivers. Now it was time to narrow that list down to 1.
I appreciate it. Short notice. No problem. Like I said on the phone, my name is Sam Smallcombe. I'm the detective here. And I'm working on a cold case from 1988 that's been unsolved all this time. Okay.
The DNA of John and Judith Waters' youngest son was already in the system and didn't match. 2 other brothers agreed to DNA tests. One of those brothers, Sonny Waters, is meeting with the latest of the detectives working the case, who mentions nothing about the newest DNA work, how the list of killers had been narrowed down to him and his brothers.
Literally, I have a name list of 2,000 names from that time period of people that were living in the area, and your name just happens to be on the list, and for whatever reason, nobody ever contacted you, or...
No, this is the first I've ever heard from anybody.
Okay.
And including, you say, my 2 brothers you interviewed, they have never said a word about it.
Okay.
Brother Rob lives in South Carolina.
There's a reason Sonny Waters says that his brother Robert left Three Rivers decades earlier.
He got a little trouble here at home. They put him in a juvenile home for a little while. He got his time there and done good, got out, and married a real nice lady.
Okay.
And she said, I'm getting you out of this state. She said, you're not going to hang around with here because it's not going to be good for you. He started his own plumbing business out there, and he's been doing it ever since.
Would you consent I take a sample of your DNA? It's just a swab. It'll only be used for this case. I'm not entering you into a database or anything like that. Just to compare with my suspect from the case.
Sure, I have nothing to hide. I would love to help any way I can.
Okay, no, I appreciate that.
You know, injustice done. That's a sad thing.
Just going to do the inside of your cheek. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to stick that right back there.
It wasn't long before they were down to one. Robert Waters. Remember, he was the childhood friend of Kathy's fiancée.
I ran into him in the grocery store, I believe, and invited him over. He came over one night.
Just a month before the murder, Waters had visited Kathy and Mike's apartment, but he had moved away to Phoenix, and police never talked to him.
Yeah, he was one line in 10,000 pages of police reports. But he was in there. I always felt the guy that did it is in here somewhere.
Hey, how you doing? Good morning. Hey, Robert. How you doing? Good. How are you? How can we help you?
I'm Sam Slocum. I'm from Three Rivers PD. This is Todd Peters from Michigan State Police.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too.
Can we talk for just a couple minutes?
Sure.
All
right.
Yeah, we can go back in here if you want. You got stuff to do in there.
Come on in.
Yeah. So, we were just wondering, I know kind of out of the blue, just stopped by here, but we had both talked to your brothers.
Okay.
Not sure, maybe they told you we had talked to them back in February.
Right.
So I'm helping Sam, and we reopened this case from Three Rivers way back in the day, going back through and getting interviews and just everything. Right. Okay. So we were wondering if you wouldn't have time to come down to the PD and talk with us down there.
Yeah.
Okay. You just get yourself down there. We can. Are you available right now?
It was 7:40 in the morning on April 30th, a Sunday, in Beaufort, South Carolina. Waters, now 53, was a successful plumber, married, 2 children, living in a $500,000 home. Police were not letting on that he was their one and only suspect.
We're kind of making a circle around, trying to clean up all the people who aren't in Michigan. We're just trying to clear everybody and say, hey, we talked to them, and just kind of how we do stuff. I know it's kind of a shocker to have us just, boom, show up. We'll just expect in a couple minutes and we'll meet you. That's fine. All right, thank you, sir.
But Waters did not show up, leading to this phone call from State Police Detective Todd Peterson.
Hey, Robert. Todd Peterson from the State Police.
I'm just getting ready to head up that way.
Oh, okay.
And basically you want to question me about what again?
It's about, you may not even remember us, but back in 1988, there was a homicide of a girl in Three Rivers, Michigan, where you used to live or near.
Okay.
Yep. And so we opened that case back up.
When exactly did that happen?
1988.
But when in the 88? Because I do know that we were in Arizona because my daughter was born down there in Phoenix.
By mid-morning, police were back at Waters' home.
Hello. How you doing? Hey, you talked to he called you back.
Yeah, he did.
I know you wanted to drive yourself down.
That's fine.
We'll have you ride with
him. No, he said just ride with him.
Probably a lot of worn out spots from.
Waters has been a plumber for 20 years.
Well, we had like 6 trucks.
Oh, geez, yeah.
That was way back when the economy crashed. Well, my wife was pregnant, so my son's 19. It was like 19 years ago that we downsized.
If he was worried, it wasn't showing. Not once does he complain during his 7+ hours at the police station. 7 hours of small talk.
And in summer it's hot.
Yeah.
And in the winter it's cold.
Yeah.
I don't care what they tell you. Beaufort's an island. I mean, don't say I don't drink stone every now and then. I put up the flat, smooth, hardy plank 4x8 sheets.
What Waters doesn't know is that state police at a lab in Michigan are checking his newly taken prints against the print left in blood on Kathy's pink telephone 35 years ago.
Hang on just a second. I gotta take a call real quick here. Yes, sir.
Hey, sorry about that. We're struggling with this print here. So if you could like take the finger, both the right middle and the right ring, and roll the entire finger, and then also like roll it up to try to get the tip of the finger print clearly. So we can see that.
You wanna come get your fingers dirty again?
And we're gonna roll it one more time on this side. This one, same exact thing.
Then his palms. And back to small talk.
If you like seafood,
Yeah, I do.
you will like that place. And let's just mark that one as right pinky.
A third printing, and still no complaints. More small talk, this time about his homeowners association.
Yeah, we got everything you need pretty much. Tennis court, walking trails.
Life's been good. Then a DNA swab.
We got, samples on it. So we're come out here, we gotta walk you through a footprint.
Over the years, police had taken more than 1,000 footprints in this case, hoping one would match the print left in blood in Kathy's bathroom. They are certain this will be the last. It's 5:45 in the afternoon. It's been 10 hours since police introduced themselves to Robert Waters. Three Rivers Detective Sergeant Sam Smallcombe enters the room at the Beaufort Police Department.
We did submit the print that we took from you earlier. It did match to the one at the crime scene. So our prosecutor has authorized a warrant for your arrest. And the judge signed it. So at this time you are under arrest for the murder of Kathy Schwartz. Okay?
No more small talk. His footprint also was a match, and so was his DNA to the blood left on Kathy's phone. But it wasn't in time for Courtney's pops and Grandma Augie, or for the original detectives, including Kenny Baker, who all died before it was solved. Police had called Kathy's daughter Courtney on April 29th to tell her they had reopened the case.
And then the next day is when they called and said that they were down in South Carolina and they had Robert Waters in custody.
A man she had never heard of, living 900 miles away in Beaufort, South Carolina, a city she had never heard of.
It kills me knowing that they just are down there and they were just down there living the best life that they could. And here I am trying to make sure that my kids never feel what I felt.
No.
As she waited for St. Joseph County Sheriff's deputies to return Waters to Michigan to face charges, she prepared herself to see him in court.
He didn't have to look at me or anything. He didn't have to say anything. All I wanted was for him to feel my presence in the room. Like I'm the baby. Here I am 35 years later.
But just 5 days and 8 hours after his arrest, Waters hanged himself with a sheet in the Beaufort County Detention Center. Reports show Waters was being held in general population in a cell by himself, not on suicide watch. Guards found Bible-based pamphlets on a table in Waters' cell about creation and forgiveness.
One of my friends was telling me, well, he is where he needs to be now, talking about hell because he killed himself. And I said, I don't feel like he deserves to be in heaven or hell. I feel like he is in limbo right with where I am. Like, I've been in limbo my whole life. Like, I didn't have a mom, I didn't have a dad, I did have my grandparents, but that's not the same.
Kathy's fiancé never suspected his childhood friend.
For a shot. For a shot.
Why?
I don't know. I've never thought him.
So here we are, 35 years later. Troy Schulteis, the long suspected ex-boyfriend known as Harley, quit school and left his hometown to escape the whispers and the finger pointing. He is back at Three Rivers, living in his mom's basement. Can't hold a job. He would not go on camera, but his mom did.
So what did this do to your family?
Well, for one thing, I mean, it's devastating. There's no way to, any way you look at it. It just, it's like turned him into probably a hermit type thing, or whatever. He just stayed to himself. He didn't, how can you explain? I don't know. Ruined it. Flat ruined it. Period.
Kathy's best friend is left to wonder what would have happened if the worst had not happened. Kathy would be 54, a grandmother.
She was a wonderful person. She didn't get to live her life. She had a lot of friends who cared about her. She had a daughter that she didn't get to see grow up. There's a lot of life that wasn't allowed to be lived, and she's never going to be forgotten by those of us that loved her. But the story needs to be told. It really does.
Oh, isn't it? Not just your buddy, but his buddy.
Yeah. Kathy's fiance, Mike Warner, now lives with his mother just outside of town. He can't hold a job. Most days, he rides his bike and picks up bottles and cans. For a while, he would leave a rose on Kathy's tombstone.
There was always flowers and little decorations that we didn't put out there. Like me, my grandma and grandpa didn't put out there. So they had to have been from
Courtney was 19 when she last visited Mike's mom, Grandma Glory. The man who had planned to marry her mom and raise her showed up. She has since seen him on his bike around town.
I told my kids, I'm like, oh my God, that's the guy that my mom was going to marry. And he was going to adopt me. And it just didn't happen that way.
I'm just wondering, what could have been.
Right? Yeah. Never know, I guess.
Yeah. You were expecting to raise her, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it just didn't work out that way, I guess.
Zeb Quinn left work on January 2nd and never returned. They always think if he ran away, he was going to create a series of fight for his life or something.
anytime someone goes missing and they stay missing for that long, you begin to think that something terrible has happened.
Another strange twist in the case came 2 weeks after Quinn disappeared. His missing car turned up at Three Pigs Barbecue on McDowell Street with lips drawn on the back window and a puppy in the back seat.
I can't figure out where he went to. There's no indication that he just ran away either.
It's so obvious that it's almost too obvious because the car was left. Good to see what's going on there.
The latest effort to find Zeb Quinn is front and center on this week's edition of Iguana.
I just need to know if he's alive or dead. I need to find him and bury him if he is dead.
Quinn was last seen in this Hendersonville Road convenience store at 9:14 at night.
Nothing. No clues that could lead to an arrest. No hints of whether he is dead or alive.
We do believe that he was killed.
It's no longer just a missing person cold case. Zeb Quinn's disappearance is now being called a murder investigation.
He's a person of interest in Quinn's disappearance.
Over the years, it's destroyed me. I've gone through my soul. It really hurts.
Do you feel justice in this case was served?
In the early 2000s, I was a freelance magazine writer, and an editor of mine at Spin Magazine called me up and he said, there's this fascinating disappearance case outside of Asheville, North Carolina. A young man who's gone missing and the whole town is wondering what happened. So my editor sent me down there and I got to work.
It's a national magazine spinning a local tale, the disappearance of Zeb Quinn.
If nothing else, what a blessing for my child, for the whole country to be able to get to know him and what's going on surrounding him.
At this point, had you covered a lot of these missing person cases?
Not many. I was really young at the time. I was just starting out in my career as a magazine writer. So this was a real challenge for me, and boy, it was certainly interesting. Zeb Quinn, who, by all accounts, was a very likable person. You know, he had some learning disabilities. He was very close with his mother. He asked just about anybody who knew him, and they say he was completely harmless. Didn't have a bad bone in his body. And one day he just disappears. And there didn't seem to be any sort of motive.
Thank you.
The yellow ribbons are everywhere inside this Walmart, a sign of the concern and worry coworkers have for Zeb Quinn's safety.
I probably talk to 10 or 15 people a day that ask, how's Zeb? Has anybody heard anything about Zeb?
But anytime you have a young 18-year-old, person, whether it's a boy or a girl, disappear and then it just, out of nowhere, it should captivate our attention and our concern, and we should want answers.
Jason worked with Zeb at Walmart, at the local Walmart. And Jason said that the two of them left Walmart that evening, drove together to look at a used car that Jason knew about and that Zeb might want to purchase. Jason said that while they were driving to this car, Zeb rear-ended Jason's car. They both stopped, got out, and somewhere along this way, Zeb said he had a pager. His pager had gone off, and that he needed to make a phone call.
And the key to finding out exactly what happened to Zeb may be in retracing his final steps on the night he disappeared.
And we now know that he came here to this Citgo at the corner of Hendersonville and Long Shoals Road because he came past these doors to use this phone to return a page that he'd received. We know that because Zeb was caught on tape.
Quinn was last seen in this Hendersonville Road convenience store at 9:14 at night with Jason Owens.
When he came back from making the phone call, Jason said Zeb was very excited, and he just drove off, and that was it.
I got a phone call here at the store, and it turns out it was Jason Owens calling in saying that he was Zeb Quinn and that he was not going to be in to work. And I knew that was not Zeb's voice. And so as soon as he hung up, I hit star 69 on the phones to find out that it was traced to Volvo Construction Company where Jason Owens worked.
Jason made a phone call from his place of employment to Zeb's place of employment, pretending to be Zeb. I mean, that's policing 101. That can be figured out right away.
Call Walmart. What a dumb idea was that? I mean, just think about it.
Hey there.
Hi, Jason. I'm Heather. He's the last person police know Zeb was with the night he disappeared. And one of the things we wanted to ask Jason about is why he checked himself into this urgent care center the day after Zeb disappeared. And more importantly, why he didn't mention that to detectives. Jason told us his trip to the urgent care had nothing to do with Zeb. His injuries were from a car wreck. And as far as the police were concerned, he would only answer the questions they asked.
There is no evidence so far that they can find that he was harmed, but they can't figure out where he went to. There's no indication that he just ran away either.
Now, from Western North Carolina's news leader, this is News 13 Tonight.
Another strange twist in the case came 2 weeks after Quinn disappeared. His missing car turned up at Three Pigs Barbecue on McDowell Street.
The car, to this day, it's sort of impossible to figure out.
We may get some information from the car that, will be able to steer us in the right direction or give us some idea of what's going on.
Clues to the disappearance of Zeb Quinn are few, but strange. This drawing found on the back of the missing teen's abandoned car is something police say they can't say they've seen before.
On the back of the car, there was a set of lips that was drawn on the back window of the car. And on each side of the lips is an exclamation point. Now, this could have been drawn with, a lipstick, crayon, magic marker, or paint. And we're not sure when the drawing was placed on the car.
Inside the car, investigators found this, a magnetic hotel key. So far, they haven't been able to trace where it came from or who used it last.
You have a hotel room key, and the local police somehow can't pull any usable information off of it. You had, I believe, a jacket that maybe was not Zeb's size. And then you had this pair of lips drawn in red lipstick on the back windshield. Just bizarre.
Once the car was found, that really, made it seem like it just didn't make sense, But I feel like the car was placed there and set up in that way to just throw everyone off.
Police now know the car was parked here at the Little Pigs parking lot sometime between 9 p.m. Saturday night and 8:30 Sunday morning. What police don't know is why it took nearly 2 weeks for the car to turn up at all.
I think it was placed there where it would be found easily. If not, then we'd have found the car behind the warehouse out in the woods or something like that.
And you go over it time and again trying to piece it together. What are these various elements in sum total? It's just sort of impossible to figure out, and it gives the case another layer and a sort of broader life, if you will.
And then a local couple came forward reporting to police that they saw Zeb's Mazda being driven on Tunnel Road by a white female about 25 to 30 years old with light brown curly hair. From their description, a composite sketch was made.
Yeah, the sketch of Misty, or the sketch of someone who appeared to be Misty, was another fascinating piece.
I
even was open to the fact that maybe there was a side to him that I didn't know.
They had spent months speculating what had happened to him, and this was one of the possible motives. They replayed these final days, these final weeks with me over and over. And one thing we talked about quite a bit was the fact that Zeb had a bit of a crush on a young woman that he went to school with, but she had a boyfriend. And there was a phone call not long before Zeb disappeared, in which there seemed to be some sort of threat from the boyfriend to Zeb.
That is Zeb's mother and father, and I believe also sister, gave a lot of information to law enforcement back then about the relationship between Missy Taylor and Zeb's crush on her and Wesley Smith, the boyfriend. While certainly we could see in the documentation that they were interviewed on a number of occasions, what we found 22 years later is that, there was no reason for Jason to cause any harm to Zeb Quinn. They were friends. They fished together some. There was no motive whatsoever. Jason didn't know who Misty Taylor was or Wesley was. I think far more fodder for investigation there. There was some, but it just occurred to us that there was very little follow-up on anything.
Just in obtaining the samples doesn't mean that we necessarily have something to compare it against, because at this point we don't.
This new warrant focuses on a woman who detectives say Quinn had an affection for and whose boyfriend was abusive.
Presently, we don't consider the person the search warrant was issued against to be a suspect, a person of interest. All we know is that she did have a relationship with Zeb Quinn.
But whether it helped solve the case remains a mystery.
It wasn't really a new lead. It was just some kind of unfinished casework that needed to be done when we went through and reviewed the file.
The disappearance itself, the discovery of the car, the possible love triangle, and you had a prime suspect who the police never seemed to be able to get their hands around. And then the case went on for years, but all those years it seemed that folks in Asheville never really forgot that. The thing is, when someone disappears and stays gone, those theories multiply. And often they're based on almost nothing.
What Jason, has expressed to us is that he didn't trust law enforcement. He didn't trust anybody. He didn't trust his family. He felt completely alone.
Summed up, the warrant comes to this conclusion. There is probable cause to believe that evidence material to the investigation of the disappearance of Zeb Quinn exists on the person of Robert Jason Owens.
And we went to his residence and served the search warrant and took him into custody and seized the evidence, and then he was released.
Jason Owens was brought here to the Buncombe County Jail Wednesday night, where he was processed for forensic evidence, including head and pubic hair, blood, and saliva samples.
This particular evidence will be compared to evidence that we seized from the vehicle of the person that we served a search warrant on, and the vehicle that had belonged to Zeb Quinn.
And there's new information included in the warrant. Jason Owens' own mother reported her son missing the morning after Zeb disappeared. Mrs. Owens stated she got worried and called the Buncombe County Sheriff's Department. Records show Mrs. Owens called at 7 a.m.
In one of those encounters with law enforcement, there was an accident and Jason ended up in the hospital.
Police say they tried to pull 24-year-old Jason Owens over, suspecting he was driving drunk. Instead, he fled, a chase that went from 240 to 26 all the way down Ledbetter Road.
Sometime shortly after turning on Ledbetter Road, shots were fired at the officer from the occupant of the vehicle. We received information from several people that live here, residents, that they had also heard shots being fired.
The SWAT team is searching for the gun that might have been used, and this isn't the first time police have tried to turn up evidence involving Owens.
The past is the present every single day. So, it's hard just because it raises my hopes.
Hopes that a wreck today might in some way shed some light on her son's disappearance almost 2 years ago. Asheville police officers reenact what they know about the minutes just before 18-year-old Zeb Quinn disappeared. Officers are posing as Zeb and Jason Owens, who they believe was the final person to see him alive. One of the main reasons for the exposure, police are hoping to figure out where Zeb's car was for the 2 weeks between when he disappeared and when the car was found at Little Pig's Barbecue near Asheville High School.
We're really wanting to see who had that vehicle without seeking criminal charges against them. Just where did they locate the vehicle? We think they just went joyriding, and they might be able to tell us where they found it.
Quinn's family just wants some basic answers.
You know, anybody who's missing anybody in their life, the big unanswered question is usually why. And I don't even really need to know that, just where, and let us have some closure.
New information on the Quinn case led detectives to execute a search warrant on a piece of property in Leicester.
As you know, there's never been a body recovered in the investigation involving Zeb Quinn's disappearance. The Asheville Police Department is committed to leaving no stone unturned.
Based on new leads and all these years later, Owen is now a person of interest.
We are serving a search warrant on this property, and we would like to recover evidence in the furtherance of the investigation involving the disappearance of Zeb Quinn.
They've asked for this man's help. He's a forensics geophysicist from Colorado.
In many cases, small departments, and Asheville's not small, but they don't understand the value of aerial photographs nor how to obtain aerial photographs.
Clark uses remote sensing to detect disturbances in the ground that may reveal what investigators are looking for.
Obviously, a 7-year-old case can create a lot of challenges. There is no direct area that we're searching. It's a very large area.
But after 2 days of extensively searching this property, nothing. Authorities did not find any evidence linking Jason Owens to the murder, and they determined this is not where the crime took place. Quinn's family is desperate for answers, but unfortunately, those would not come from the search of Owens' home.
Detectives were able to obtain a warrant for Robert Jason Owen on Monday, March 16th, for the breaking and entering and larceny from 87 Hookers Gap Road. He did admit to taking items from the Codd residence, and some of those we had recovered from Donna Drive.
The Codds were a very attractive couple, very likable. They were involved in TV and film. JT was involved in television production. He was behind the camera. Christy was a very vivacious front of the camera, on camera personality, if you will. And that her dream was to appear on cooking shows and to be sort of a permanent presence in that world. And I learned that she'd had some successes already.
On Sunday, March 15, 2015, the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office received a request for a welfare check at 87 Hookers Gap Road in the Leicester community.
The Mountain View in Leicester is overwhelmed by the sound of a highway patrol search helicopter off in the distance.
Bill Schoen, who is Christy's father, called in because she was supposed to be in Mississippi on Sunday, and they had not been able to make contact with her. Patrol officers responded to the residence in were able to enter the residence and determine that there was evidence of suspicious activity.
Deputies found the couple's vehicles there at home and their 2 family dogs inside.
When detectives were unable to locate the Codds, a missing persons investigation was started immediately.
It is mountainous terrain, quite a few trees, homes interspersed here and there, and so that does present challenges in trying to do a search like this.
Loved ones and neighbors more worried as more time passes.
Hopefully they find them. I hate to hear anything about the neighbors, and like that is really nice couple.
Detectives prepared and executed several search warrants and preservation orders for cell phone, telephone data. On Sunday evening, the sheriff's office received a report of suspicious activity on Donna Drive in the Candler community. Deputies responded and recovered items belonging to Christy Schumann Codd.
In that garbage container, they found a handgun, ammunition, pillow covers, and a bedspread. Also, jewelry items.
Just before 7 p.m. at their rural home, Buncombe County deputies sealed up their driveway with crime tape.
And I really do hope that you're found safe. I really do, because she's pregnant.
Cecilia Owens is Christy's good friend and neighbor who says Christy was expecting a child. Within 45 minutes of our interview with Cecilia, deputy cars raced up Hooker's Gap Road to Cecilia's neighbor. Crime tape then put up on the perimeter of the property that 2 neighbors confirmed belonged to Jason Owens. Investigators staying on the scene, neighbors seeing Jason under arrest.
There were just about 4 of them went up there, and they got him, took him out.
Jason's uncle told News 13 off camera he has no information on Jason or why he was arrested.
Information from that interview led detectives to prepare and execute several search warrants that, where they believed material to be human remains, was recovered from the Owen residence at 8 Owen Cove Road in the Lester community.
I was shocked to learn of this new chapter in Jason Owens' life. The Codd killings completely threw me for a loop.
There are 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of murder of an unborn child. In the 2 first-degree murder cases, there are 2 possible punishments: life without parole or death. In the murder of an unborn child case, the maximum possible punishment is life without parole.
When Owens was brought in for questioning, the dumpster was sitting in a secured lot behind the sheriff's office in plain sight. There for Owens to see.
When he pulled in, he just physically, it was a physical reaction he had. He knew what was in there.
This mobile home, located at 8 Owens Cove Road, is a part of a much bigger story.
Sure does raise a lot of questions. I mean, it would not be truthful to say that it didn't, but we don't know what we have with that, and we continue to work through that and process that same.
The Buncombe County Deputy Fire Marshal says this mobile home fire is suspicious.
That fire was located at the Owens residence. It was located on that curtilage. That was a building that was not his primary residence.
With all of this crime scene tape here recently, people are beginning to lose sleep because of what's going on in their community.
Maybe someone was helping him, and they burnt that down to cover up evidence. That's what I'm thinking.
According to Asheville police records, on March 26, 2015, Jason's uncle Gene met with detectives. He told them once it was revealed how Jason disposed of the Codd's remains, quote, "Maybe that's what happened to Zeb," end quote. Gene then pointed them to a project on Jason's property.
Police searched the property of Jason Owens. He's a person of interest in Quinn's disappearance, and he is currently in jail charged with the murders of a Lester couple and their unborn child.
News 13's Jericho Insco joins us live and has those search warrants. Jericho, what kind of evidence was seized?
Darcel, police aren't saying anything about what they found, like whether it was human bones or if they believe they have discovered Quinn's remains. So these documents still leave us with a lot of questions. Those search warrants released Monday tell us what investigators involved in Quinn's case found. Fabric, leather materials, unknown hard fragments, unknown white powder substance, Metal and concrete are the listed items seized from Owens' property on that day.
Gene got out first, went back to his truck. I got out of my truck and walked around back. To the back of your truck? The back of Gene's truck. And then Zeb got out of the car and walked beside the passenger side on Gene's truck. So Zeb comes around towards you guys there? Yes. What? But when I asked him where we was at, he said to be there in 2 minutes. And I guess Zeb was thinking too that she was down that trail, and he started looking down the trail. And at that time, Gene reached in the back of the pickup truck, brought out a 22 rifle, and shot him in the back of the head.
Thank you so much for coming here and helping. We're going to keep that in the way we have.
Not try to cooperate. But anyway,
What do you think happened to Zeb?
Zeb?
Yeah.
Obviously going.
What kind of rifles did he have?
22s, primarily. Shotgun, 22s, I like no 22s. I just want pointers. I asked why were you so far away from the house? And I remember he had no plastered concrete up, and then later he come a pile that he burnt brush and so forth, and he just made it as a burn area. And then of course when those come across the news about the burning bodies, I thought that's a burn pile.
That's a big connection to make, huh?
Huh?
That's a
One of it's over the years I hadn't thought nothing about it, And then she leaves full of the burn. And then the mom's place burned down the second day or so. And the burn thing, it sort of focused back, with the burn pile. I mean, Jason loved to burn. I mean, he burned it, he was always burning something.
The following day, investigators conducted a search out here in the Bent Creek area where Jason alleges Zeb was murdered. They recovered 17 various .22 caliber shells. Meanwhile, Gene denied any involvement and said if Jason had implicated him, it was, quote, a lie.
The picture that we have of Gene Owens has to do with looking, with talking to other people about him. We spent quite a bit of time talking to women that Gene had been involved with. The one in particular, a woman who told us that she left this area because Gene threatened to kill her.
I met Gene, I think 1999. He fixed my car, and we started a relationship not long after that. So he was my boyfriend. When I was packing, his sister had called, and I told her, Betsy, that I was leaving, and she called him, and he came and he blocked the driveway, so I couldn't get out. And at the top of the hill, there was a trailer there, and it was a retired police officer, and he said that he called the police because he seen Gene had a knife. Well, Gene, after that, said that it was because he was going to cut my tires so I couldn't leave. So that's the first time that he scared me. Gene, you did what Gene said. I mean, if you watched in his life, like where he worked or just out, if he knew somebody, there was like a loyalty to him or respect.
You can talk to Jason about this. About him being wrapped up in this and the police hassling him.
Through the Zeb Quinn disappearance, you guys are still in your relationship. What are you noticing between Gene and Jason? Did they become closer? Were they still distant from each other?
Gene was spending a lot of time talking to Jason about things, but he said it was to try and figure out how to help him.
What do you think he meant by that?
Well, Gene had always said that you can't get DNA evidence from crocodile poop. You can get rid of a body and no one will find it.
Do you remember watching the news around the time Zeb went missing?
It was on TV each day, you know.
During this Zeb Quinn saga, obviously it's broadcast everywhere. It's all over the county. It's also making national attention. Did you see Gene switch at any point? Did he ever seem like he was trying to also hide something?
Gene was always hiding something, I feel like. So I couldn't say it was like exaggerated more. I can't explain that.
Do you feel like he was one person you never really could predict what he was thinking or going to do?
Oh yeah. You weren't going to get to the heart of him. you know somebody, you were never going to get there.
Now to our top story. A grand jury indicts the man accused of murdering a pregnant Food Network reality star and her husband on charges he dismembered their remains.
Now, Robert Jason Owens was told of these new indictments in court today.
Robert Jason Owens stood expressionless behind a glass and steel partition in the courtroom as he learned of the new charges against him.
You have been indicted with 2 counts of robbery with a dangerous weapon. These are Class D felonies.
And then the next.
You have also been indicted with the offenses of dismembering human remains.
Owens showed no reaction and only spoke briefly to ask for a public defender.
What would you like to do by your attorney, sir?
I was appointed to represent him when he was charged with the murder of the Codds. It was kind of unusual that almost from the beginning, when Mr. Owens was charged with the murder of the Codds, the name Zeb Quinn surfaced immediately. And the first time it came up, frankly, as I recall, was in a press conference in which the district attorney, Todd Williams, the Asheville Police Department, and Sheriff Van Duncan at the time held a press conference.
What's the APD's involvement in this case?
Well, one thing I was asked early on is it's the same Robert Jason Owens that was looked at as a suspect during the Zeb Quinn homicide investigation. Is not our case, and I can't make reference to anything about that case, but what I did do was confirm, yes, that is the same Robert Jason Owens that is mentioned in that case.
And they passed out information to the media, which commingled information about the Codds murder and the disappearance of Zeb Quinn, and the fact that Jason Owens had been a suspect. And in fact, the district attorney, Todd Williams, had made some comments to Sean Devereaux and I about, wanting to know whether or not our client could reveal exactly what happened to Zeb Quinn and, his involvement.
I began thinking about going back to Asheville and doing more on it and seeing Jason. So I spoke with Jason's attorney many times. I reached out to the Codds representatives. I reached out back to the Quinn family because I was thinking there's something really odd and special and grisly about these two cases that not only make for good storytelling, if you will, but are important for people to understand.
Defense lawyer Victoria Jane checked in with Robert Jason Owens during what turned out to be a pretrial hearing of only about 15 minutes. District Attorney Todd Williams was here to notify the court of his intention to seek the death penalty in the March murders of Christy and J.T. Codd, also their unborn child. Owens took a seat next to his attorneys as the DA laid out special circumstances he believes qualify this case for capital punishment, multiple victims, as well as a charge of armed robbery. As for Robert Jason Owens, he offered no reaction, kept his head lowered as he left the courtroom shackled at the waist and ankles.
This is News 13 at noon.
New this hour, a Buncombe County man pleads guilty in the murders of a pregnant Food Network star, her husband, and their unborn child.
Robert Jason Owens sat there, agreed to a plea deal, which has again not yet been finalized, and then sat emotionless as the assistant district attorney read out some of the graphic details of these murders. And then again, stone-faced, watching as the families of JT and Christy Codd got up to read statements about their loved ones. Owens admitted to killing the Codds, but he said that he accidentally ran over them when his truck got stuck in the mud near their house. The assistant district attorney said he then took the bodies inside, cut them up, and burned them, disposing of the remains.
The district attorney should be ashamed of himself. I really feel like he's let the families down. I think everybody should have heard every piece of evidence that the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office collected. Everybody should have heard the real story. Now we're going to hear a story that's been made up by the defense team and Jason himself.
Owens' defense team says that he was heavily impaired on medications that day and that he didn't want to report the accident, as they called it, once he had run over them, and that's why he had disposed of the bodies.
He was always extremely remorseful. Not that that makes up for it or is an excuse for it. He certainly was honest about what happened.
I know it had been weighing on you all the time. They were two of my best friends. I loved them because they loved me. JT and Christy didn't have friends. They had family. And, just like that, I was part of their family. And, this wasn't something intentional. It was an accident.
I have to say my first reaction is that I am so heartbroken. I'm so hurt. I'm disgusted and I'm angry about the injustice that is being done to JT, to Christy and their unborn child, and to both of their families. There should be no plea deal.
This truly horrific crime presented many challenges, but in the end, the victims' families support this resolution and that it holds Jason Owens accountable for precisely what he admitted doing. These pleas, signed, sworn, and entered in court today, deliver a punishment that is tantamount to a sentence of death in prison for Jason Owens.
I can tell you we certainly don't believe Jason Owens' story. I think the district attorney and his office put it best yesterday, and that he's absolutely guilty of what he's admitting to today, and probably more. With the system we work in, sometimes outcomes like yesterday are as far as you can get them.
And it was really Jason who said to us, I'm here in jail and I trust you guys and I want to tell you what happened. I want to tell somebody what happened to Zeb Quinn. And his reason for doing that was not to get himself a deal, okay? He knew that he was in very serious trouble. He told us that he wanted Zeb's mother to know what happened.
In the past, I've had a lot of anger and hatred towards you guys. I know you have. And I'm trying to change about that. I want to help you guys. I do. Honestly, this is a story of my life. I've got to get it off my chest. Get the truth out there. Get some resolve for his family.
We begin tonight with breaking news.
A major development in a missing case that haunted people in the mountains for almost 2 decades. A Buncombe County grand jury has indicted Robert Jason Owens in the murder of Zeb Quinn.
One of the attorneys who represented Owens in the Codd case spoke with News 13 by phone tonight, reaction to her client being charged now in the murder of Zeb Quinn.
I'm not totally surprised by it because certainly I've known that Jason Owens has been the only suspect that they considered for the past, 17 years. Now, I'm surprised to hear that after all of this time, with no more information than apparently that they had 17 years ago, that they have charged Jason Owens. That disappoints me.
The question is why it took so many years. Why now?
Any new evidence that primed this indictment that was presented in court, or any evidence of a body found?
Those specifically are investigative matters and matters for the courts, like
I cannot answer specifically.
Police investigators cite an ongoing investigation as reason for few details at this point in the Quinn case.
We're still following up on leads of this case and going over what we do have and working to strengthen the case as we would in absolutely any homicide.
Buncombe County District Attorney Todd Williams backs up why police are holding off as part of something his office has to do as well, despite what is a cold case that has captivated people for so long.
I understand the community's interest in this case. However, this case, as our office views it, is no different from any other case that we're prosecuting.
In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic shut down the court system here, delaying hundreds of cases for months. Robert Jason Owens' case was one of them.
We continue to follow breaking news this afternoon. A plea deal in a 22-year-old cold case.
If it is a plea, for some reason, there's a benefit to him, or he perceives that there's a benefit.
Hard to believe 22 years, this has really been captivating Western North Carolina and the nation. This case really grabbing a lot of headlines, a lot of attention, a lot of eyes really on this. Now go ahead and take a look at some of this video we captured. This was Owens entering court earlier today.
The court will accept the plea.
Owens stating his deceased uncle pulled the trigger.
And had he witnessed Gene Owens shoot and kill Zeb Quinn? And his answer was yes.
Clearly, Jason, put the pieces together for law enforcement.
Gene Owens admitted that he knew Adam Wright, and Adam told Jason that he had been the one to introduce Wesley Smith to Gene. So he considered himself to be, the sort of the intermediary. All we know is that Adam told Jason that he had introduced Wesley to Gene. And we know that Gene somehow knew that Zeb had a thing for Misty, who was Wesley's girlfriend at the time. And that Gene, then went to Jason to get Jason to be the one to tell Zeb to come up to the woods that night.
Still, investigators said Owens was the last person seen with Zeb.
That security footage captured the last known images of Zeb Quinn, and that was the last time he was seen.
The fact that the family is in agreement with the plea, and based on the difficulty it would be possibly to get a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt on the murder plea based on the conflicting evidence.
Today in court, Zeb's family, including his mother, accepting the plea, saying this.
This is the young man that was taken from his family, friends, and community of the world. This is the young man that would never have seen his end coming. This is the young man that trusted Jason to be his friend.
Gene Owens was the killer. We don't doubt that. Gene Owens is the killer, and he's dead. And whatever the arrangements were for Gene to kill Zeb Quinn, those people have never been charged.
We took the case, including all of the police reports, exhibits, and evidence we could obtain, to John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City. There we spoke to Dr. Alfred S. Titus Jr., a former NYPD homicide detective and hostage negotiator, for review.
There are a lot of different ways that I would have went with this particular case at that time and even now.
Smaller police departments and police departments who don't usually handle such crimes, they would just inherently struggle with them, right? They don't have the experience. This case was complicated.
There was some, but it just occurred to us that there was very little follow-up on anything. Things are not always as they appear to be. Sometimes you got to get down under it. And in this case, the theory of a jealous boyfriend, that's not an uncommon theme. That's not an uncommon situation in which we find somebody dead.
In homicides, there are three common motives: love and relationship, money, or revenge. One of those three. And love is usually the very first one, most of the time, especially when relationships, like in this case, come into question, and you realize that this is something that exists in this situation. That's where you look first.
What often happens with some investigations is that someone shows up, like Jason is the last one seen with, and they don't believe his story. So then there's so much focus that he is a suspect, that instead of gathering all the facts and letting the facts speak to what happened, sometimes officers begin to just try to make the facts fit their theory.
They had the key players, and they had one key piece of evidence, which was that car. Everything was right there, and for some reason, the law enforcement was not able to close it.
I think you can say with confidence that if the Cods hadn't met that terrible end, the Zed Quinn case would still be open.
Did it seem like there might have been a fumble with the Quinn case that left this safeguard down, where obviously Jason was able to repeat or commit another crime?
Well, I'm certain that the Cod family would think that, wouldn't they? If Jason was in prison, they'd still be alive. Whose fault is that? I think it deserves closer scrutiny.
There's some hesitation to accept his story to be 100% fact whenever you really don't have any other persons or witnesses to verify these claims. But what we do know is Robert Jason Owens, through the letters that he sent us and when we've been chatting with him, that he wants to share this story, or at least his account of what took place in 2000.
My uncle Gene came up to the house that evening and asked me to go to Walmart. He asked me if I knew him. And I told him, yeah, me and him had went fishing a couple of times. And then he told me about this girl, Misty, that Zed was seeing, and said that she wanted him to meet her up there at the campground by Lake Powhatan. And so I went to Walmart that night, went straight to electronics and told Zed, this sounded legit to him. He told me about this girl, boyfriend beating up on her, everything. He was excited about it. Sounded, like I said, legit to him. So I didn't think anything was about it. And I didn't know Uncle Jim was going to be up there. I meet with him when we go up there. There's Uncle Jim. And we're in the car and everything. We got out of the vehicles and asked him where is he at. And he said, she'd be here now. So there was a trail going down behind his truck, and I thought it might have been a little campsite. So Zed, he looked down the hill towards that trail, and that's when my uncle reached in the back of his pickup truck that went through and was shot in the head. And so literally, he hit the ground, his body flat to the ground. That's when I realized what happened.
already burning for several hours. It just seems a little impossible to incinerate a body like that in that amount of hours with just a campfire.
I thought the same thing too. And this goes to the cause case. Something that I realized is our body fat is accelerant. It burns off.
Zep's Mazda showed up outside of Little Pig's barbecue. Did you have anything to do with that? Did you know about it?
No, I don't know where that car was at. I had heard it was in the hospital parking lot. Other than that, I don't know where that car was at. I don't know why he put the car there.
Who did it?
Ended up there or anything.
Who did that? Do you think?
It had to have been Gene.
Why?
I think it was just like the lipstick on the car. I think that's his arrogant way of his signature.
What would have been Gene's motivation to get involved with this?
Money.
What?
Money. Had to be money. Money, something valuable. You know, he never told me, but he got something out of it. He wouldn't have done it if he didn't.
That night, was there any remorse from Gene?
No, he has no remorse for anything.
Are you remorseful for the actions that happened?
Oh, yeah. It's eaten me over the years. My silence has no reflection of what my heart really feels. Over the years, it's destroyed me. You know, I didn't want to keep my silence. I didn't want to hurt Zep's mom. Over the years, like I told you, I went back up there. I don't know, hundreds of times. I went up there to sit, just to talk to him. And, you know, to beg his forgiveness. You know, asking God, please help me somehow or another figure a way that I can tell this. You know, the whole time Gene was alive, I couldn't tell because even if they arrested him, he had ways to get to me. He would hire somebody to kill him. And so I knew I seen him shoot Zeb for no reason. I knew he would be too.
Why not take that to the grave?
At that point, I felt that my life was over. Whatever happened was going to happen. I wanted it off of my chest. I didn't care what happened to me anymore. I didn't care if Gene killed me. I didn't care if he got somebody to kill me. It didn't matter anymore. But I couldn't go to my grave with it.
Yeah, I think that's probably a bitter pill for the Quinn family to swallow. Because all these years later, I'm certain that all they want to know is what happened in Zeb's final hours. And the only version they have is coming from somebody who says he was directly involved in it and who has the motive to deflect responsibility away from himself. Unfortunately, in such cases, often that's all a family is ever going to have.
Do you feel justice in this case was served?
I feel like justice was served in this case only partially.
I think they got their man, but they didn't get the charge on him.
I think justice was served for Jason in that he admitted to what he was guilty of in the Zeb Quinn matter, which was, being an accessory.
The family wants justice. The family wants every single person who is involved in a murder or disappearance to be held accountable.
None of us feels that there's any justice for Zeb Quinn's family.
Do you think justice was ever served for this case, or will justice ever be served?
For Zeb, no, because they let Uncle Gene die. They charged me 2 days after Gene died. They knew he did it. They let him get away with it. I
should have kept my mouth shut for all those years, but I did at least come forward and tell them, give them the opportunity to at least to take a few years of his life away. But as far as justice, no.
For that, I would say, I guess, what is justice? Our system of justice is a man-made system. It's full of flaws.
And in this case, it just feels incomplete.